Let me just start to introducing the panel. I'll start with Eric Meyer. Eric, a lot of you know Eric. In case you don't, he's the founder and executive director of our host, Generation Atomic, whose mission is to, quote, energize and empower today's generations to advocate for a nuclear future. Dan King. Dan. He is currently a policy and outreach manager at Xcel Energy. Earlier in his career, he did a three-year stint as a science and tech fellow for the U.S. Department of Energy. When he initially joined Xcel Energy, his focus was on creating new renewable energy, energy storage, energy efficiency, and demand response products. You're doing a little something different than that now, though, Dan?
So I'm on the community relations team working with cities reaching their sustainability goals, and I also manage the Carbon-Free Future Minnesota Coalition too, that Generation Atomic is part of. Cities, customers, individuals, associations that are kind of supportive of our goals to reach 100% carbon-free electricity.
Great. And then Isabel Ricker, am I saying that correctly? Ricker? Yeah. So she's the director for clean electricity at Fresh Energy. Many of you know about Fresh Energy. But their mission is to, quote, shape and drive bold policy solutions to achieve equitable, carbon-neutral economies. If I get this right from their website, your particular interest is in, and expertise is in technical policy issues and also in energy distribution. Is that close, or you want to add to that?
Sure, thank you. Good to be here. Thanks for having me. So our department, the mission, sorry, I'm hearing an echo. Is that okay? Is the audio okay for everyone? Okay, great. Our department's mission is to decarbonize the electricity sector serving Minnesota. That means working on the regional grid that spans from Canada to Louisiana. So my historical background interests in this area were primarily on the distribution system, but I do a lot of work on coal plants, gas plants, big grid issues as well.
Well, thank you all for being here. Let's start with the kind of obvious question. It's a big film. It's an ambitious film. What do you think of it? Dan, we'll start with you.
Sure, yeah. So I think it gave a great historical overview of nuclear energy and a lot of the political forces at play. Kind of appropriately separated out kind of nuclear weapons development from the commercial nuclear reactors. I think one of the things that jumped out to me was kind of some really interesting framing about the safety of nuclear energy. I like the kind of piece towards the end of saying that kind of scary is different than dangerous, and really highlighting that although there can be there are scary aspects to some of the nuclear incidents that are happening in Chernobyl, most notably, that just comparing that to the public health risks, impacts of all kinds of other forms of generation, as well as the kind of just the risks of mining coal and things like that, are really kind of understated when you compare that to nuclear. So I thought that was a great thing. And I also enjoyed the reference to the all-electric homes too, in light of a lot of the current policy goals in that arena as well.
Okay, what do you think?
Yeah, similar reaction. I appreciated that distinction and some fact-checking on the safety issues. I had a few quibbles with, the role nuclear might play in the future electric grid, but I really appreciated the sort of optimistic, emotional content of the film, and I do think it's, very worthwhile taking a clear-eyed look and not continuing to have fears that aren't necessarily proven out by the evidence.
Hold on to those quibbles, because that's the second question.
Great.
Eric, what do you like about it?
Yeah, well, Dr. James Hansen, in his review of this film, was quoted as saying it's the most informative documentary ever. And I think that's accurate. There's a lot of charts and graphs in there. It is definitely info-packed, which it maybe could limit its appeal to certain audiences. I know, you guys here are all the amazing folks that will come out and watch a full-length documentary in the theater. Thank you for that. Incredible. But I know a lot of folks are looking for something that's maybe about 30 to 40 minutes and they can stream on their TV. So I think for helping inform the public about nuclear power's potential benefits and the whole story, perhaps that form factor might work better for future media out there. So that's my quibble, is that it's a long movie.
Yeah. Isabel, your quibbles?
The overall message of the film that we need to consider nuclear and that it can play an important role in decarbonizing the economy by helping us decarbonize electricity. I don't disagree at all with we got to produce a lot more electricity. We got to move everything we can possibly move onto electricity, onto it. And it's going to be really hard. We're going to have to build a lot of stuff. We're going to have to build a lot of renewables. We're going to have to build a lot of transmission. I just don't know that nuclear is the only way that we do that. There are a number of promising technologies. Some already exist, like nuclear. They're maybe going through some innovation cycles right now. And then there's some other additional newer technologies. They talked about hydrogen. That's a good technology that can play a similar role potentially in providing that clean, firm, dispatchable role in the energy space.
So there was a Bill Gates quote where he talked about we are either going to need a storage miracle, and I don't like the word miracle. I mean, I believe in them, but I don't know who controls them. Storage miracle or nuclear. How does that strike you? I mean, can we wait on it? It feels like if we're going to make net zero by 2050, waiting for a miracle is not really, can't be part of the plan.
Totally agree. Yeah. I think our main feeling is we need to build what we can build as soon as we can build it. And what we have today and what's able to be built today is mostly wind and solar and short-term storage. And these newer technologies, we really have to see, like, what can they do in the next 5 to 8 years? And we really need to start deploying them at scale in the next decade. So.
Yeah. Go ahead.
If I could, yeah. I mean, Isabel's exactly right. It's illegal to build new nuclear plants in Minnesota, unfortunately, which is, it's kind of having your hands tied behind your back. Not that there are a lot of utilities that are chomping at the bit to build a whole bunch of nuclear, but projects take a long time to develop. And, as we've seen around the world, the way you get good at building nuclear is doing it over and over again. And, but for recent memory, all we have in the US anyway is the Vogtle plant in Georgia, which was a first of a kind design. So it took a lot longer than you would hope and costs more than you would hope. So I get the hesitation by our state legislature to repeal the moratorium, but I hope that they do so. It gives folks like Excel all of the potential tools in the toolbox going forward.
And when you say illegal, I want to be oversimplistic, but you mean there's a law?
There's a law. There's a moratorium on all nuclear construction in Minnesota, passed in 1994. There are 12 other states that have these. A lot of them are like, until we get a federal waste repository, they have a little like asterisk. Ours is just a blanket, like, no, sorry, Public Utilities Commission cannot issue a certificate of need. So we just have like a hard line.
So Chernobyl was 86 and that was 94, and it was, if the arc of the story is correct, that's how that happened.
Yeah, 94 was maybe also peak popularity of The Simpsons. I don't know, could have something to do with it.
Three-eyed fish is now replaced the walleye. Dan?
So sure, on kind of some of the critiques there, I think it was, the film was a little bit unnecessarily critical of some renewable technologies. I don't think they need to do that to make the point of the role of nuclear. They're not really in competition with one another. The spring is set to build as much wind and solar as we can and make sense, and that's set. That's a good thing. That's good for the environment. That's good for Xcel Energy customers. What's left is that there is going to be some portion that does need that firm dispatchable energy source, something you can turn on any time and can keep going as long as there's a fuel source that you can put into that. It's more than just nuclear or a storage miracle. They pass through geothermal very quickly, and when I was at DOE, I did work in the geothermal technologies office, and there's promise there. There's a lot that can be done on the demand side too, demand management that can really take care of some of reduce the need for the firm dispatchable section of that. And there's also fossil generation with carbon capture. So really all of those are in play. It's not going to be winner take all. Nuclear likely has a role in that, but it's yet to be determined in this kind of technology advancement going forward what is going to be the optimal mix of all of this.
So it being Minnesota-centric, it said that they said a number of times that the energy requirements will be 3 to 4 times higher between here and 2050. Is that what we anticipate in this state, or that was a global position?
I noticed that as well. And there was also somebody who was quoted near the end saying that United States electricity demand is stagnant. And I thought that's actually not going to be correct over the next couple decades. Because clearly as we move a lot of our home heating, that's gas right now, to electricity, that's going to use electricity. When we're moving our cars from gasoline to EVs, that's going to use more electricity. A lot of the projections are saying like 2 to 3 times our current electricity usage. So while our net energy use might be about the same or a little bit lower over time, the electricity is going to be crazy. So we really have to think about, we're not just replacing the fossil fuels, we got to double at least probably our grid. I don't know if you guys have agreed with that.
Yeah, I don't have a projection off the top of my head, but yes, we do project electricity use to grow with electrification of other sectors, for sure.
So here's a question from the audience. Well, there's 2 questions, but let's go with this first one. Do you support community ownership of nuclear or nationalization? It was interesting that at least the end of the piece seemed to suggest a lot of this would come out of private companies, if I got that correct.
I'll just say real briefly, we do have a blueprint of what that looks like. I think France, right? EDF, Electricity de France, and they have they're among the world record leaders for fastest decarbonization of an electricity sector with their crazy build out of nuclear in the 80s. So we have an example of that working well, but obviously different countries, different politics. I don't know. We have a lot of investor-owned utilities. I love that there are some smaller reactors coming along, so that's maybe an option for smaller communities, but who knows?
I mean, so the Xcel Energy perspective on that is that we're very focused on just continuing the safe operation of our existing plants and have many decades of experience of their safe operation, and hope to continue to do so and continue managing that ourselves. So. And
I'll just say, I don't have a particular opinion on that exact question, but I do think there's an important role for the government in the US to play on research and development, helping some of those private companies and the startups that they interviewed get over that we have a great idea, how do we bring it to market chasm. And second part would just be setting benchmarks and standards and goals for industry to work towards, like we saw with Governor Walz passing the 100% carbon-free by 2040 law early this session. That kind of leadership, setting a target for all of us to work toward, I think really helps get all the industry players and the private sector generally working in the same direction.
But internationally, is there any precedent for private companies developing nuclear?
My understanding is that yes, they are, but I do not know details. I know there are a number underway in Poland that are privately being developed, but there may be a role for the government, not my expertise.
Do you mean U.S. exporting to other countries?
No, in terms of a private company has created a nuclear reactor and is selling energy.
Well, yeah, I mean, towards the end of the film, they had several examples of companies working now on advanced nuclear reactors. Xcel Energy does have a partnership with NuScale. One of those represented there. We're involved in kind of monitoring and investing in the development of these new advanced reactors. A lot of those are also funded by DOE cooperative agreements and grants.
Here's a question, what about thorium as a nuclear fuel?
Yeah, maybe I'll answer this because the thorium definitely is what piqued my interest in nuclear. So I think there's a lot of value there for kind of giving people an opportunity to maybe rethink an entrenched perspective they've had for many years. That's what it was for me. And I've sang opera on buses and trains about thorium in Paris at the climate talks. So thorium's awesome. The issue is that we don't have a fuel cycle developed. Like our reactors that we have today are not set up to run on thorium very easily. And there's plenty of uranium. It's not overly expensive. There's actually 4 billion tons of uranium in the ocean, and they keep coming up with better and better like sponges to absorb it. It's crazy. So maybe we'll use thorium. It's going to be great for India, who is looking into integrating the thorium fuel cycle into their reactors. And I understand the possibility of using it in some of the CANDU's, the Canadian reactors up in Ontario. But yeah, probably not in the US in the next 20 years.
This question, since the Yucca Mountain site isn't usable now, what's the future of long-term waste disposal? It brings up, I think you touched on it, Dan, that they, or no, maybe you didn't, but the film touched about maybe it minimized it sort of suggested that nuclear waste was just another form of waste and not any trickier than any other forms. Maybe oversimplified it. I don't know. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think it definitely didn't get into all of the complexity with the management of spent fuel and waste, which I think are kind of, someone pointed out in the film too, those are kind of different categories. A lot of what we refer to as waste actually still does have value as a potential fuel in the future. I mean, it's a big issue. I mean, right now with Xcel Energy, we have the space, we have the ability to safely store the spent fuel on site, but that is not the agreement that was made at the onset of those plants with the industry or the communities around them, and so a lot of stakeholders involved rightfully want the federal government to take that responsibility to have that long-term storage solution. And you're right that Yucca Mountain is likely a no-go here now. The DOE's focus, or I don't know if it's their sole focus, but among others is a kind of consent-based storage siting that could be an interim solution. So that's likely what's moving forward. I'm not sure on what timeline that is, but that's something that's very critical to solve for the industry to move forward.
You jumped over it kind of quickly, but the promise of fast reactors for recycling and drastically reducing the amount of nuclear waste. Because most current reactors only burn like 5% of a fuel rod, is that correct, roughly?
Yeah, so that was in there a little bit, right? They went to the Russian fast breeder, the commercialized fast breeder reactor, the BN800. Because of the incredible energy density of uranium, you gotta make a lot of electricity to like appreciably decrease the volume of waste. The good news is there's really not a lot of it to begin with. You saw the graphic up there that if we took all the waste in the US, you could fit it all in a Walmart. So I think the main value from recycling really is, hey, we don't have to mine any uranium if we do that. And it's kind of a good story. It's a feel-good story rather than like solving some issue of running out of space to store the waste, because volumetrically pretty small.
Should we worry that the nuclear fission industry will sabotage the nuclear fusion industry, just like the fossil fuels industry sabotaged nuclear fission. Which brings up one of my favorite quotes when he said, "It's just business. You know, it's not a conspiracy. It's just business."
So the question is, should we worry that the fusion industry will sabotage the fission, or the other way around?
Either or, I think. Whoever gets to the top first will sabotage the other.
I don't know. I don't think I really see that happening. I think that a lot of this is in a well, I mean, there's the mature fission industry that's currently active, and that's doing its own thing, and there's the new emerging technologies are, it's different. They're at kind of a lower technology readiness level than kind of the parallel that we were talking about between kind of fossil fuels and nuclear there. So, I mean, there's competitive elements going on all the time in business, but I don't think that that's a specific worry as a large phenomenon.
I know we don't speak for the DOE, but does the DOE have a role in choosing the winners? How do the winners get chosen?
I don't think it's not choosing winners, but it's investing in all kinds of technologies and seeing how they progress and moving it through that kind of demonstration deployment stage, and then it gets into kind of other market and regulatory and sociological forces at that point that kind of ultimately it's a complex mix that determines winners in this.
And I'm assuming, Eric, that everything looks like fission will get there first, before fusion. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's already the second largest source of low carbon energy in the world, largest in North America and Europe. So yes. That being said, we have a few of our volunteers, a bunch of volunteers. A few of them are fusion engineers, and of course they're excited about fission and fusion, because they see them both as this incredibly energy dense power source that doesn't require very much land or raw materials and can be relied upon 24/7, 365. So they see it as a really important tool for powering our world in an environmentally friendly way.
Dan, I think this one's for you. What's the latest with the tritium water leakage at our Monticello plant?
Yes, so that was obviously big news recently, and the good news is that we obviously monitor that site very extensively, and the leak was identified before it spread beyond the footprint of the site. Everything was contained in groundwater underneath the site there. Never any risk to public health in the surrounding areas. The last I heard, as of maybe 2 weeks ago or so, it was around 40 to 50% of the water had been recovered and is now being stored on site, and that will continue on until all of the leak water in the groundwater around there has been recovered. It's not spreading currently; it's all being pumped up into storage tanks on site.
Can I ask Excel a favor if this happens again? Put everything in units of either banana equivalent dose or like X-ray equivalent. That's one thing we started doing right away. We put one of our volunteers who's here tonight, Philip Holt. We put this calculator together to see, because they use really weird units to describe the concentration of radioactivity, like millions of picocuries per liter, but the total leak amount is in gallons, and you're like, okay, you're trying to confuse me here. But what we figured out is you'd have to drink about 8 gallons of that water directly from the source to equal a chest X-ray. So, it's just to put it in perspective. Like if you drank a cup, is the equivalent, I think, of 6 bananas in terms of radioactivity. And that's directly from the source. So I guess the way we reacted to it does not, in my opinion, align with what the actual danger was. And I hope that in the future Excel can help model that as well.
Yeah, that's good feedback, and we've certainly been listening to all of the concern from the communities coming from various perspectives on that, and we're always learning how to best communicate about incidents like this.
So if you had been able to close out the film instead of and replace Stephen Hawking's, what would you have added to the film? What would you, if you could, what could you add to the film? I'll start with Isabel. You want to start?
Yeah, I think, going back to my quibbles, I think, as Dan was saying, giving renewables a little bit more credit for the role that they're likely to play, I think could have been helpful just for grounding the film in a little bit more like, this is really what we're looking for nuclear, the role that we're looking for nuclear to play, the space that we're looking for it to play in. And I think he did a good job in the inspiring climate optimism, and we can do this. We have tools at our disposal. There's so many smart people across the world working on this problem. I think one of the main things that on the nuclear front that we need to do is figure out, invest a lot, continuing doing the innovation that we're doing, but also invest in the storage issue and community acceptance, because that's a really important hurdle that we haven't done a great job at addressing so far from what I've seen. So both of those things, innovation and trying to make sure that the communities that may be hosting are informed and excited and involved in that process.
I guess I would have liked to hear a stronger call to action. I think Stone really sort of placed himself and in many parts of the movie as kind of the hero who's telling this truth to the world, and in a way he is using his platform for that, which is helpful. As a nuclear advocate, I'm really thankful when somebody famous says, hey, nuclear is good. Certainly, but maybe kind of knighting people in the audience, as it were, or giving them permission to say, look, if you are persuaded by the message of this film, you can do something about it, and your help is needed to help change public perception, change laws to enable this technology to grow. I felt like that was missing a little bit.
Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I guess where my mind was going to, and as well as talking to, was that I wanted to come back to the point where I forget who it was, but one of the Idaho National Lab people was saying how ambitious it would be to get to 30% or maybe even 50% renewables. And I just hope everybody knows in this room that we're already well past 30% here in the upper Midwest and on our way to over 50% by the end of the decade with plans in place, plans approved. Thank you. And we also currently already have, I think it's close to 30%, around 27% of the electricity is from nuclear, and those are both kind of the foundation of reaching this new 2040 100% carbon-free electricity target from the state. So I think while the film was rightfully taking kind of a global perspective on this, I just want to make sure that everybody in this room knows where we are in the upper Midwest. We're already almost 70% carbon-free electricity generation. So just wanted to take the opportunity to say that. And then maybe what it was missing, even though it was kind of very detailed and chart heavy and stuff like that, it still almost didn't get into the cost competitiveness of things like that, and that really part of it does come down to nuclear is expensive in some ways. Not all of it is because of the extensive regulation. Some of it is, there's some cost savings there, but it is a rather expensive. But there's also really great things about it too. It does have that very small footprint for given energy generation. It definitely wins in that category. And part of the reason it's more expensive is that there's more jobs that it takes to run a nuclear plant than it does to operate a wind farm or something like that. And that comes along with a lot of benefits to the community that a nuclear plant is hosted in.
So Xcel's plan to get to net zero by 2040, would not need any additional nuclear. We could do that with per Monticello. Would not need, that's not part of the equation.
Correct. We're not contemplating any new nuclear
Yeah.
in that time.
I think we can do it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, a friend of mine likes to say that nuclear is an expensive way to create cheap electricity because of the reliability and the services to the grid it provides. You don't need to have a backup gas plant just kind of idling just in case the wind dies down. And that, when you look around the world, you do see places that have very high penetrations of renewables without like a bunch of pumped hydro or something to help store that energy, have pretty expensive power. Places, California, most expensive in the US, Germany, most expensive in Europe. So, on a per unit basis of adding nuclear, it seems pretty expensive, but as part of the electricity system, it makes a little bit more sense on an economic side.
They highlight France and say that 70% of their power is generated by nuclear, and then without giving numbers, the French spokesman said that they have the cheapest electricity in Europe. Is that the two related? Is that not at all related? Not true?
It's not quite the cheapest, but it is about half as much as Germany, somewhere in there. So yeah, that is helpful. Part of it is you're not curtailing power that you couldn't use, and electricity markets are very weird, and you sometimes have to pay other states or other countries to take your power. In Minnesota, it makes a little bit more sense because we have some regulation on it. But it'd be. I think a lot of it stems from thinking of electricity as a commodity instead of a service. Like if you got a dump truck of food that pulled up to your house and it was 90%, it was 10% of the cost of buying it throughout the year. It was way cheaper, 90% cheaper, but it was just dumped on your front door. Think of all the freezers and stuff you'd have to buy to try to store that food. And electricity is the same way. We don't need it all at one time. If we get it all at once, it's really expensive to store it. We need it like reliably throughout the course of the year.
How else besides movie nights can Minnesotans learn about decarbonizing our state and the U.S.?
I feel like someone must have planted that one. Thank you, Scott. Well, Fresh Energy has a lot of great information on our website, our podcast, newsletter for people interested in learning about decarbonizing the economy, not just electricity. We have a buildings program that talks about electrifying, moving away from natural gas for cooking, heating, etc. We've got a transportation and an industry program too. So encourage you to go to our website, sign up for the newsletter, listen to our podcast. It's called Decarbonize, very on brand. But Excel also has a lot of great resources for those looking to put solar on your roof or install an EV charger, all that kind of stuff.
May I ask a quick question?
Oh, sure.
I checked your website has no reference at all. Is that going to change soon?
No reference to nuclear. There's probably some articles, but they're probably a bit old. I don't know. I can talk to our comms team. Yeah.
And I'll take this opportunity to plug again the Carbon Free Future Minnesota Coalition. You can check that out. So we're, again, we're looking to gather supportive communities, customers, individuals in terms of reaching the 100% carbon-free electricity goals. And also, there's a lot of great information on kind of customer programs for energy efficiency, renewable energy programs, demand management on the XL website.
Yeah, I'll just add, I think we need to be encouraging school boards, teachers to talk about this in their classes, especially middle school, high school, because that's going to be one of the biggest bottlenecks. Is we don't have the workforce to make this transition. We need kids that are thinking about going to college, thinking about how we're going to save the world with clean energy. So spread the word to your teachers and school boards.
Well, we promised 9:30, and it's 9:30. We've given away all the Westinghouse total electricity homes. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and for our panelists, thanks for coming.
Thank you.